Full disclosure, the voice you are listening to now is artificially generated, brought to you by satisphonic.com. See the link in the description for more details. What's claimed as a masterpiece by the whole world, but you don't just get why. If you're not sorting this by controversial, you're not getting the opinions this question was meant for. The Mona Lisa isn't even the most interesting piece by Da Vinci, and Da Vinci's best work weren't his painting. I may be wrong, but it was my understanding that the Mona Lisa was the best example of the coming together of painting techniques that Da Vinci invented, such as sfumato. Admittedly, it's hard to appreciate under all those layers of yellowing varnish, bulletproof glass, and crowds of tourists. Yeah, it's such a shame about the varnish. The Mona Lisa isn't looking her best because of it. Hopefully, they will remove it one day. They did it to Prado's copy of the Mona Lisa and looks so much better. Taps the history blog. Comwhoop contentu uploads to 101,405 Mona Lisa Prado Louvre Jap. Oh, that is such a difference in color. What is the purpose of the varnish? Protection. Varnish helps protecting the colors. As part of a restoration, it can be replaced with a fresh layer. Edit. Since people can't read any further. Yes, varnish protects the color, but it will eventually discolor. A restoration is almost never non-invasive and can damage the original work. Hence, why people are very careful performing one. It requires research on what solvents will react least with the paints. In some cases, the paint will be touched up because of the damage done during a restoration. Varnish will add a gloss or be matte, changing the properties of the colors. Usually, the intent is to make them more vibrant. So to protect the colors, they ruin all the colors. Varnish is a protective coating on top of the colors. Instead of the colors fading or degrading, the varnish seals them in and keeps them mostly preserved. However, if you just let the varnish sit there for a few centuries or so, it's bound to go yellow and degrade somewhat, and the Mona Lisa currently hasn't, to my knowledge, gotten a restoration job since the 1800s. However, you can quite easily remove the varnish and apply a fresh protective coat, restoring the visibility to the still vibrant colors underneath. Without the varnish, the pigments themselves will fade and degrade much faster, and there's no restoring that without simply repainting the painting. It probably hasn't had a restoration in so long because they're afraid it'll get fucked up, and that's their meal ticket. Can't blame them after some of the botched restorations we've all seen over the years. Just don't get a well-meaning grandmother to do it and you'll be fine. The technique is only a part of the fame. It got more interesting because it was stolen and just kept under a bed for 2 years, and the way it was stolen would be unimaginable today. The thief admitted he only stole it because it was easy to carry. He took it off the wall. The Mona Lisa didn't have a whole room back then, removed the glass case and just left the Louvre. He was an employee, so he could roam freely and nobody suspected a thing. This story is so absurd if you think about it. There's a cool YouTube channel that explains why artistic masterpieces are considered masterpieces. There's a really good one about the Mona Lisa that changed my opinion. There are many reasons, one of which is the combination of the setting in the painting and the subject. He made some very interesting creative decisions involving a hint of imagination and surrealism in the background that was unprecedented at the time for a painting like this. Also unprecedented was painting a portrait like this. Also unprecedented was painting a portrait like this without all the embellishments of you. Can you provide a link to the YouTube channel? The Mona Lisa got famous because it was stolen once, and the entire way of how it resurfaced is quite mysterious and was big in the news. So the picture got famous due to the news coverage. Prior to that, it was just one of Da Vinci's paintings. The Mona Lisa was a famous painting before it was stolen. It was so treasured that Napoleon had it hanging in his own bedroom at Fontainebleau. Getting stolen certainly made it more famous, but it was well known and loved before that. Napoleon had a bedroom in the Vegas casino, Fontainebleau. How did I not know about this? This makes the painting way more interesting. In this thread, people ignoring the question and just saying stuff they don't like. Beyonce sucks. The Mona Lisa was a famous painting before it was stolen. It was so treasured that Napoleon had it hanging in his own bedroom at Fontainebleau. Getting stolen certainly made it more famous, but it was well known and loved before that. Great question. Uasid Misok. I'd say James Joyce's Ulysses. It's poetic at times, has quotable lines throughout, and was undoubtedly revolutionary in its style. But goddamn, it is impenetrable for vast passages, filled with archaic references, which I don't think are particularly clever, and is just way too long. Stream of conscious wordplay, free association, and outright rambling gets old pretty quick. I read all of Ulysses across 2 college seminars nearly 30 years ago. It took about 10 months to get through it. At times it took hours to get through a single page, just to research and pass out whatever the fuck JJ was trying to say. There were sections in multiple languages. Sections were read aloud in class. I listened to passages I didn't understand on records to try to hear the poetry of it. When I finished the class, I threw my very dog-eared, highlighted book into the trash. It was a tortuous experience. I stopped reading for a few years afterward. I didn't finish another book until Harry Potter came out, and it was absolutely the reading cure I needed after slogging through that pretentious, dense word salad book. The Louvre is overwhelmingly for an art lover. To have such masterpieces as Delacroix, The Death of Sardanapalus and Gericault's, The Raft of the Medusa just hanging along the wall in one of the gallery walkways just blew my mind. And of course, that's just one micro-example, but I could study those paintings all day long. I couldn't fathom why everyone was crowding Mona. The film Breakfast at Tiffany's. The first time I watched it, I didn't get it. I felt like something was missing. Then I read the book and a lot is missing. Add the Mickey Rooney character and the whole thing becomes unwatchable. The song Breakfast at Tiffany's, however, is a masterpiece. Lil Sebastian. I don't get it at all. I mean, he's kind of a small horse. Get out. How dare you? I have cried twice in my life. Once, when I was 7 and I was hit by a school bus. And then again, when I heard that Lil Sebastian had passed. When I came into work today, the flag was at half-mast, and I thought, great, another bureaucrat ate it. Then I found out it was Lil Sebastian. Half-mast is too damn high. Show some damn respect. The song Breakfast at Tiffany's, however, is a masterpiece. We need to make a song to memorialize his life. Something like Candle in the Wind, but like 5,000 times better. That small horse has an honorary degree from Notre Dame. Thank you very much. What the fuck is your issue? It's Lil Sebastian. Masterpieces were initially pieces submitted when the person wanted to become a master. Somebody who was able to teach others, not somebody who was at the pinnacle of their craft. So many masterpieces are inferior works of the person because they started teaching and added interesting influences or increased their technique because of it. People often use masterpiece when they mean magnum opus. Masterpiece actually indeed means something like a breakthrough movie for a director, although the meaning definitely has changed, so it's not weird that it's used this way. It's the Renaissance's version of a dissertation. Somewhere along the way, people forgot the term magnum opus. The Eiffel Tower. Everyone in Paris thought it was hideous when it was built. It's not really that aesthetically pleasing. Building a 300 metal tower in 1889 truly was an engineering prowess. It's not the most beautiful landmark on Earth, but when you're at its feet it's still impressive. It was supposed to be built only for the Exposition Universelle and disassembled 20 years later. Disassembled. Exhausting. I'm not doing it. Eiffel had to convince Paris city officials that it can be useful. A lot of science experiments were led there and then. It was used as a radio tower. CEVE, wireless transmissions technology for the French military, is what saved the tower, and it proved useful shortly after, during the First World War. It was also used for when a guy jumped off it with a homemade parachute and straight up died when it failed. Alright, take a nap. And then fire the fucking missiles! I work with steel. When I visited Paris, I sat in front of the tower for 30 minutes in awe of the engineering work accomplished in the 1880s. Different strokes, I get. Imagined by John Lennon, it's a fucking pretentious, arrogant wankfest of a song. And to top it off, the film clip of this cunt in a big white mansion with a white grand piano, getting driven round in a Rolls Royce, while clothes in designer fashion. To its credit, how else would Tone, deaf celebrities, let us know they too are suffering under COVID lockdowns on their spacious estate. Gwyneth Paltrow was suffering so much during COVID, she ate bread. Day 6, wasn't it? What I find hilarious is that the Beatles broke up because of creative differences, with John wanting to pursue more experimental music. Then his 2 big hits, Imagine and Happy Xmas, War is Over, are way more bland and pretentious than anything he ever did with the Beatles. And Paul McCartney went on to do Wings, which had a really unique and interesting sound. George Harrison had a triple record of songs they slept on that were experimental as fucklove. They both wrote some great songs, together and separately, but it always seemed like Lennon was kind of mean and self-absorbed. McCartney was, and is, an arrogant control freak. I like George. Quiet, humbler, wicked sense of humor. Chicago outdid them a few years later with the Ferris wheel. Not only was it tall, it moved. The Ferris wheel was invented to compete with the Eiffel Tower. Lennon was an arrogant, pretentious wanker. So it tracks. I think most people that are answering this with Mona Lisa, F Tower, May J, etc., are right but also wrong. Everyone loved The Notebook, but I didn't understand why, because it felt like every other romantic movie out there. I now understand why. I watched it recently, so now I have copious remix inspirations of such movies in hundreds, so it doesn't feel as special as it might be for them at that time. These were marvelous at the time they were made. People are just carrying on that hype forward. If you look at the present day, there are many such arts and architectures that could overtake them. But the difference is accessibility to resources that we have now these then. Lennon was an ass his entire life, and I always preferred McCartney's post-Beatles output, but Lennon had more than the two hits you mentioned, off the top of my head. Give Peace a Chance, Jealous Guy, Mind Games, Instant Karma, Starting Over, Watching the Wheels. And he collaborated with Bowie on Fame. He did more experimental stuff as well, but much like his experimental stuff with the Beatles, it wasn't popular. And as much as I love McCartney, Wonderful Christmas Time doesn't compare to Happy Xmas. I think Banksy is pretentious at best, and his art is mediocre. I get this. It's like classic books. I tried to read Frankenstein recently and couldn't get through it. Found it boring and obvious. But at the time that was probably a mega twist, and no wonder people fawned over it, and the books it has inspired since then will be in the thousands. But give me a more recent mystery book over that any day. I like Queen quite a lot, but man, do I not care for Bohemian Rhapsody. The song is fine, yeah, but whenever it comes on, I really wish it was anything else from them. Queen has so many bangers, and for some reason, Brie has so many bangers, and for some reason, Bri is the thing people gravitate toward. I get why it is a good song, and I can appreciate it as a musician, but I just don't get why people consider it their greatest work. Hamilton musical. A lot of Picasso's work or Jackson Pollock's work, pretty much every Thomas Kinkade. Thomas Kinkade is literally the most hated artist in the world. My wife and I see several musicals per year, and finally saw Hamilton a few years ago after hearing constant hype about it. People we'd talked to who had seen it seemed genuinely blown away, and all of the critical response to it, not even hyperbole, seemed to be Hamilton is the most revolutionary show in the history of Broadway and is going to change musical theater forever. It was. Good even, but I thought it was nowhere close to what could be considered revolutionary. It's a Broadway musical heavily incorporating hip-hop with a historical backdrop, and that's about it. Worth seeing? Probably. Worth the hype? Not even close. But to be fair to Picasso, he was actually a very talented artist. Lots of art out there where people have no real ability and just draw awfully and pass it off as art. But Picasso was capable of realism, so I assume his work was all intentional. Picasso had basically mastered realism at a young age, so the question was, where next? Cubism is, in part, about trying to represent more of a 3D space than you actually can on a tool canvas. Along with his friends, he opened up a lot of space in art. He could have stuck with realism and probably been a lot better off monetarily in his youth, but he might not have been remembered at all. Stranger Things. We get it. You all wish you lived in the 80s and never saw the Goonies before. I was born in 77. Loved through the whole 80s, and I think its great first series captured the atmosphere perfectly later. Ones aren't so good, but it's still very well done. The more you know what's happening, the least interesting the series get. We're talking through the lights and Winona trying to explain it in sound was the best moment of the whole series. Picasso had basically mastered realism at a young age. So the question was, where next? Cubism is, in part, about trying to represent more of a 3D space than you actually can on a tooled canvas. Along with his friends, he opened up a lot of space in art. He could have stuck with realism and probably been a lot better off monetarily in his youth, but he might not have been remembered at all. The movie Avatar. It's like never ending and could have used 50% cut. Watched it once. Was enough. Would never watch it again. It looked cool and all, but that's about it. Not even people who like Avatar proclaim it to be a masterpiece. Into the Wild, a mentally ill bum walks into Alaska completely unprepared and kills himself because he's stupid. He's a hero? What? I would like it to be 50% longer, even at its current length. Ending felt very rushed, and the plot generally just incredibly generic. With the extra time, they could flesh out the world building to be more unique and establish more meaningful connections between characters. Most of the iconic American female singers, Beyoncé, Mariah et al. It's the warbling style, trying to hit every damn note in one song. It's uniquely American, and I think it sounds stupid. Also, any fashion designed by Kanye, like Whoop, and singers love doing it to the US national anthem and the land of the free. Nice osts though. Obligatory shout. Out to that time, Fergie absolutely butchered it. The term for that variation is melisma, and it has a long history, featuring in opera, gospel, and Jewish religious music, among others. That's not to say it's not annoying to some listeners, but it's far from uniquely American.